Okay, there we go. Now that's way better. Definitely more like it. Could have had that before.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, say that thou art High King of heaven, thou art. Hey, wanna play hide and clap?
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with episode 20 of Halloween Horror Review 6. And this episode is going to be for the prequel to the bad 2014 spinoff. But this one, though, was thankfully the better one, and thankfully the one that should have been made in the first place. I don't know why they could have made this to begin with. Why we had to have a bad one instead of this. But the point is, this is going to be for 2017's Annabelle creation. Yeah, I got this cool cover right here. Directed by David F. Sandberg, who directed the Shazam movies. And directed a film called Lights Out. So, what is the plot of Annabelle creation? Well, this is set This is basically set years before the 2014 movie. But a doll manufacturer named Samuel Mullins is a happy family man with his wife Esther and their daughter Bee until she dies after being hit by a car. 12 years later, Samuel and Esther welcome this nun and 6 orphan girls in his home. He tells them that only a locked room that belongs to Bee and Esther's room would be off limits for the girls. The crippled girl, Janice, manages to sneak into Bee's room during the night and finds a doll locked inside a closet. Then she plays in a room she's haunted by an evil force. So what does Janice unleash in Bee's room? So, as for my reaction to Annabelle creation, I think guys may all know I hate the first Annabelle film. So, when this was announced and this was going to be coming out, I was not hyped for this at all whatsoever. But then I saw the positive reactions this movie received upon premiere back in 2017. So when this film came out, around 2017, around the time that summer was ending, I went and saw this in the theaters during my unemployed years. When I received a theater gift card for my birthday. And you know what? This movie was actually good. This is actually definitely a lot better than the first one. First Annabelle. Well, that's no shock, though, because the first Annabelle's terrible. In fact, this is what I wish we had instead. Wish we had this with that first one to begin with. You did not need to see a movie about the opening scene of the first Conjuring. Well, to be fair, actually we did, but it's not what we got. We didn't need to see this boring fucking couple living next to these neighbors that get killed and nothing much happening and being the most boring couple you ever see in these fucking films. Where a doll just stands there, and it's a random book lady nobody gives a shit about. And pretty much nothing happening at all whatsoever. No. This movie, shit actually happens. This is what we should have had. Seriously, we could have... If you don't want to make a film about the opening scene of The Conjuring, then fine. Then could have just made how this doll got created in the first place. And then have it, end with the opening, the whole case so that they were investigating The Conjuring. But it doesn't end that way either. But guess what? So how was this made? So it was October 2015. Annabelle sequel was announced to be in development. And the film would be a prequel, though, instead of a sequel. And Lights Out director David F. Sandberg would thankfully replace John R. Leonetti as director, with Doberman returning to write the script and Saffron and Wong returning to produce. Filming began on June 27, 2016 in Los Angeles, California, concluded August 15, 2016. Then after the film was officially shot and advertised, Annabelle Creation would premiere at the LA Film Festival on June 19, 2017, and would be released outside the United States on August 11, 2017. At the box office, it made much better profit than Annabelle 1. It made over $306 million worldwide, and it got positive reviews from critics. Right here. And you can definitely see why. There would be another Annabelle film 2 years after this, but that might have what? You'll find that out next year. Alright, so here are the good qualities and the story of Annabelle creation. and why this film is actually good, unlike the last Annabelle film before it. So, a prequel of Annabelle, which was a prequel to The Conjuring. Nobody asked for it because they hated Annabelle 1. Nobody wanted this. No one. But we got it. And guess what? It's a good thing we did. Like, Annabelle Creation is a film you would at least expect to have business being actually this good, especially being a prequel to a bad film. The prequel really helps fill in the creation story and establish the origin of this doll's possession. When the film progresses, more of the Annabelle doll's journey is revealed, a closer look at the creature that used as a puppet and not fully complete. Like at least we have the connections like needed to somewhat make sense now about how this doll works, and it grows us in the universe. But like the name involvement and the other details of the demon story remain unanswered, but it really gets extrapolated with dialogue hints. And so the pace of the movie, like this is a film that's 110 minutes long. So there's times when horror movies, can have pacing issues at times depending on the story. But Annabelle's Creation moves at a decent pace and to maximize the movie. It's slow enough to provide build up for the scares. It's fast enough to keep everything moving and on edge. The production team really do a nice job keeping you invested in the movie. There's a little time between all the craziness, enough comic relief to relieve attention and keep things interesting. And it's no secret, like the original Annabelle movie was pretty much short of hype, but The Conjuring really set. But this prequel film really defies the odds and rights that run. It's honestly easily probably the third scariest entry of the franchise, and it does a satisfying job connecting the origin of that bad first one with this. And the young cast do perform incredibly well, and you see these band of characters throughout, complemented with the performances of Anthony LaPaglia, basically the tragic maker of the original doll, and his wife played by Miranda Otto from Lord of the Rings. Have the demon prey on these young orphans with nowhere else to go is very unsettling, and it really takes a far more brutal approach to demonic torments than a majority of the rest of the franchise really does. It really makes for some truly frightful viewing for the viewers. So how do we start off the film? So Samuel Mullins, his doll maker, and his wife grieve for the loss of their 7-year-old daughter Annabelle, nicknamed B, who then dies after she steps in front of a car. Then 12 years later, the Mullins open their home and provide shelter for sister Charlotte and 6 girls that were homeless by the closing of their orphanage. They're told that they're not allowed to go in B's locked bedroom, but Janice, though this young orphan that's disabled by polio, discovers this note that says to find them, the note that says find me, and sneaks into a room, and it becomes unlocked. It finds a key for B's closet and opens it, and then she sees an eerie porcelain doll. Then this ends up releasing a powerful demon that terrorizes the girls. So, one night, the demon that takes B's form appears to Janice and it wants her soul, tries to get away from it, but the demon recalls the stair lift and hurls her violently down the ground floor, leaves her severely injured, confined to this wheelchair. And so Janice is now confined to the first floor. Her best friend Linda now has to pretty much sleep alone and is tormented by the demon. The plot and the mythology are pretty well connected. The dramatic movements are definitely placed among sequences of distress and resorts, and evident respect, the alternation of the emotions technique that Juan did in The Conjuring 2. Interesting horror intervals with modest and sustainable interventions. The development does also flow smoothly, like you don't get too much drawbacks to sub-universe. The elements do relapse into some stereotypes, though, and the characters don't really get much motive, and there are some insane movements to an extent, and though to be able to grip audiences, though, the writers do try to produce characters that are interesting. And to be fair, there's times when whenever James Wan was involved, and do that very well. Now, when it comes to the actors in the film, Stephanie Sigmund, Anthony LaPaglia, and Miranda Otto portray the older characters in a pretty fascinating way. The first one, the leader, faithful protector of the girls, but because they're decent performances, the focus sometimes focuses too much on the more younger characters of the film. Though Lulu Wilson does also a good job on the younger actors and ratifies her potential and ability with the harder scenes. And something, when it comes to the characters, though, I would say the orphans, they don't get a lot of development. That's kind of thing. I feel like there's not really a lot of development with this nun character or the orphans, or the characters just don't really feel all that well developed. That is one nitpick I do have of the film. Like, like The Conjuring 1 and 2 actually do well in developing their characters. Like, I wish they could have did that with this movie as well. Now, the production design and the atmosphere do testify to the measured budget. They do move away from the more larger cities, from the other stuff. There, of course, and everything acquires this rustic, powerful nuance, and the housing really trapped under legitimate solar rays, this clothing and practical effects. And also, like, the whole game really works in tension moments, and the sequences and drama manage to catch the audience well. Like, it's nothing short of stunning with all the scares in the movie. Like, the point of view camera shots, like, also do well in keeping the viewer on the edge of their seat. And the slow panning, and it's able to create the suspense. And when you focus on the foreground, something moves in the background. Like, you can't really see it, and it's blurry. And once you're able to look closer and see it, it really gets you. It really does get most of the viewers. Like, that's the stuff that was missing from the first Annabelle film. Like, more scenes like this. Whenever they try to be scary, it failed. Here, when they actually try to be scary, it succeeds. This actually feels like the scares you find in the first two Conjuring films. This is like the closest of the post-Conjuring 2 movies. This one is the closest you get to an actually good, like, post-Conjuring 2 follow-up. Because at least this still had somewhat James Wan's involvements. Like, you could tell some of James Wan's tricks were still here. James Wan didn't direct the film, but David F. Sandberg actually did well in continuing on. And that's the thing. Why didn't they keep this guy? Well, to be fair, yeah, he had to go do the Shazam films, but they still should have kept him. Like, they could have had him direct The Conjuring 3. They could have had him direct The Conjuring 4. They could have had him direct those films. If James Wan wasn't able to come back, they could have had him be his replacement for the next two Conjuring films. But sadly, no. I mean, Michael Chaves didn't do bad with The Conjuring 4, but I don't like The Conjuring 3, don't like any of the Nun films. Some say The Curse of La Llorona is part of the franchise. No, it doesn't feel like it. It might as well just be its own thing. It's like, that clearly just had the Conjuring universe slapped on, so make people see it, and no one went to see it, and it bombed. For a lot of good reasons. The Annabelle movie that comes after this, now, Annabelle Comes Home wasn't definitely nowhere as bad as Annabelle 1, but it was more meh, really, more mixed bag. Now, the slow panning here really does well in creating suspense, and you focus on the foreground whenever something moves in the background. I've pretty much what I've said before to just recap that. So, one morning, the demon decides to pose as Sister Charlotte, and when Janice is outside, like, still wheelchair bound, at first, the demon poses as the nun, and it wheels Janice in the barn. And I will admit, this was a pretty effective moment because you don't know it's a nun. But then, of course, you see these, like, pale, like, pointy hands that are grabbing her wheelchair, and you don't see its face. But for what Janice sees, it's clearly something not good. And then she gets wheeled into the barn. Then, in the form of Bee, attacks and possesses her and throws a black ball directly in her mouth. Like, these are some really effective scares. Like, this whole Bee spirit looks terrifying, and most of the possessed demons in this film look terrifying. Like, the scares here really work. Like, the scares actually got to me when I saw this in the theater years ago, back when this came out. Eventually, though, Janice's behavior starts to change. After the nun comes to check on her in the barn, says she's alright, but then something is clearly not right. Then Linda notices changes in her behavior, tells Samuel that Janice snuck in Bee's room and found the doll around that bit, and there, especially when Samuel is, like, checking on the area, but Samuel immediately believes Linda. In a fit of fright and panic, heads back inside. He sees Janice can now walk, and it turns into the demon and kills Samuel, who tries following her with a crucifix, but he ends up dropping it after all his fingers break. And then Sister Charlotte hears the screams outside and then finds him dead on the floor. And then, of course, Linda decides that since Janice's doll was the one that possessed her, she's going to try to get rid of it. She tells Sister Charlotte about that, but she doesn't really reply back with words. then throws a doll into the well. So at first, Sister Charlotte is confused, and they just walk back to the house. But then this noise comes from the well, and she's almost dragged into it. But Sister Charlotte saves her. Then of course, though, when they get back, another random out of nowhere moment. Janice is gone from the couch, and she's been replaced with the Annabelle doll. So the Annabelle doll was not gotten rid of. It just basically transported back to the house. So Sister Charlotte starts to finally realize that they cannot stay at that place, and she immediately wakes the orphans, who then immediately go looking for Janice. As Sister Charlotte speaks with the disfigured Esther, can find her bedroom, and she tells that ever since Bee died, they were praying to this entity that said they would see their daughter again. But then this entity answered their prayer, and they briefly saw Bee's spirit, and it convinced them to transfer its essence into one of the crafted dolls, which they agreed to do. But it turns out that was not a good idea at all. Instead, the thing is that this demon was actually looking for a human host, and they just attracted him to their household. And so Esther saw Bee's spirit transform into this demon and gouge out her eye, and wearing half this doll-like mask to hide her injury and scars. So, with the help of they decide they're going to call priests to bless the house, and they lock the doll in Bee's closets. And so Esther and Samuel open the house as a shelter for orphan children to kind of actually make up for their actions. But has now regretted it because it's not only allowed the demon to look for a human host, and it succeeded in finding Janice as a human host. But then Esther is killed by the demon, and it goes after Sister Charlotte. There are some orphans that leave the house. So Linda gets trapped, hides in Bee's room, and then possessed Janice tries to stab her, but Sister Charlotte locks Janice and a doll inside the closet, and for a while it actually does look like pretty much that. It does look like that Linda actually stabbed Sister Charlotte for a brief bit when you first think that, because with the whole stab sound effect, but it turns out it's actually just this other doll that Linda had, that basically got stabbed instead. And then Sister Charlotte says, "Forgive me for I sinned," and Frozen pretty much locks Janice and a doll in the closet. And now, there are definitely certain scenes that are definitely framed that give you that creepy sense of knowing that the demons are going to be coming back. And I love those bits. I love that when they do that in horror films. Like this other perfect example is this dumbwaiter, like, it's going to be introduced, and when it does, it really becomes a really tense, generally frightening moment of the film. The well and the scarecrow are also very frightening moments in the film. They have these eerie setups that pay off in very effective, spine-chilling ways. The horror elements in this film are definitely strong. Like, the doll itself, thankfully, looks a lot more menacing this time around. I mean, granted, still, it doesn't necessarily move around too much, but it actually shows all the demon tricks it has. So in a way, the doll actually feels like it actually has use to the story this time around, because a demon spirit possessed it. That's the thing. So, and that's pretty much like it's this demon doing the tricks. The dolls is kind of like there is kind of a little ploy. So it feels better that way. So that thankfully this Annabelle doll actually gets used to the story. And the isolated farmhouse for an orphanage setting is very ideal for scarers, and it places the story's heart in the two orphaned girls, Janice and Linda, to give the film an emotional core. And that's the thing, you don't mind their friendship. I mean, there's times their friendship could be a little more better developed, which is what I think, because we don't really see a lot of scenes of them as friends too much in the film. There's times like try to make the danger around them a little more impactful. I mean, the young cast doesn't do bad in their performances, but to be fair, like that's one of the problems though, is that just the characters just aren't too well developed. Like the movie could have used some better character development, in the nun character and the orphans and the doll maker. It could add more scenes with him. Like another thing that's also to be noted in the story is that the film does get a little bloody at times. Like it's a little, in fact, honestly, I think this is probably the more bloody installment of the series. And that's the thing. Like most of our cast, most of the time, is honestly much more younger people. And for prequels do often lose something with stakes because you know what's going to happen if they're prequels. You know what they're setting up. There are actually children that do die in the movie. Well, technically speaking, 2 children die. And it adds tension as well. And it doesn't violate community, because, to be fair, you get references to The Conjuring 2. Like, there's one bit where Sister Charlotte has this photo, and in one bit, like, the nun from Conjuring 2 does briefly appear in the photo. If you kind of look closely, it briefly appears and it disappears from the photo. So they still have, like, references to The Conjuring 2 here, and there's an after credit scene that does sadly allude to that movie. Sadly. But thankfully, though, we actually do get the backstory to this doll, and it leads into what happens with it once the Warrens came across it in a lot of movies after this in the timeline. In a way. And of course, like, the lighting and soundtrack do blend together to give the audience some great scares, evoking these perfect little edge of the seat action. And it's a great package like Conjuring verse fans could definitely get out of when they watch these movies. And so basically, like, now when I mentioned, like, the characters don't get much development, is that yeah, they're orphans, but you don't see a lot of scenes of them together. You don't really see a lot of scenes of them being really friends or interacting with one another. The Sister Charlotte character, she does kind of look a little bit too young to be a nun. I'm gonna be honest about that. She kind of looks a little more in her 20s, really, to be really considered a nun. And the doll maker, Anthony LaPage's character, you don't really get a lot of scenes of him, to be fair, and I wish he didn't get killed off. I think that was another mistake the film made, was killing off his character and not really giving him much character development. And Mauro Otto's character just kind of spends most of the film in bed. So that's one thing that could have really been improved, is that it still kind of has some clunky character development. I mean, the character development's a little better than the characters in Annabelle 1. I mean, that's not saying much, but still. So now we get on with the finale of the movie. So the next day, unfortunately, Janice was nowhere to be found and not freed. And police arrive to search the house and find only the doll, that they do remove as evidence, and then Father Mazzi blesses the home. And then Charlotte, Linda, and the rest of the orphans have to find a new home because they can't stay there anymore. It's not safe for them to stay there anymore. The owners of that place are dead. And so they're escorted to find a new home for the orphans. Janice, sadly, did not get free from her possession because she escaped through a hole in this closet wall and ends up at an orphanage in Santa Monica. So, you know what this is leading to. She ends up being reclusive and ends up getting called Annabelle. And then, of course, this leads to our setup for the first awful Annabelle film, where the next door neighbors of the boring couple from the first film adopt Annabelle. And then another 12 years later, this Annabelle grows up, becomes involved in devil worship, and then basically goes back and murders them. And then it awakens the boring couple you saw in the last one. The boring couple. And this leads us into the first Annabelle film. I kind of wish they'd retcon that film, and you know what? I kind of wish it was actually... No, maybe not retcon that film. Maybe actually end with us actually seeing the case the Warrens were investigating. You know, the 3 people from the opening scene of The Conjuring 1. Finally see that for the ending of this movie. Why can't it be that? I don't want to see how this Annabelle gets adopted. I don't want to see her adoptive parents get murdered, or adoptive parents be the couple that got murdered in the first awful movie. I don't care about the first awful movie stuff. I don't want to see setup for that. I want to see setup for The Conjuring 1. We had the origin of the doll, so why not just show up? So instead of showing us how the first one got set up, why not just show us those 3 people? That doll haunting them. And then after they're able to escape that, or, you know, you could have even made that for the 3rd one. You could have just made that for the 3rd one instead. It's not even how Annabelle Comes Home goes. But anyway, that's how Annabelle creation ends. Charlotte and most of the orphans survive the haunting. They move on. The Mullins are both dead, though. Demon-possessed Janice ran loose, changed her name to Annabelle, and the Higgins couple adopted her, and 12 years later, they die. That's how it ends. Yeah. So now do I have any bad qualities with the film? So yeah. There are times when like the scares do get a little predictable, like the scene where you see Beast's spirit by the window, you know it's gonna be a demon face that scares Janice. Or you obviously know like when Sister Sharp, when the demon possesses the nun pushing Janice's wheelchair to the barn, you obviously know it's not her. And the ending is also very predictable. The story itself is kind of blah until it unfolds towards the end. There's some flaws in the movie that are definitely like the annoying loud music, the cliche possessed child theme, and the insistence of characters to remain in creepy forms for no reason. And I don't like instead of like setting up the Conjuring 1's opening scene, the ending basically feels like they need to set up the stupid first movie's death scene of the neighbors. Basically set up the characters you don't care about. So yeah. Other than those though, Annabelle Creation, it's still a solid prequel. It's a film that's superior to its predecessor in every way. So in the end, if you hated the first Annabelle film, well don't worry, because this is a way better film, so you can just watch that instead and pretend this is the only one of that trilogy that exists. Anyways, guys, that's it for my view of Annabelle Creation. If you want to rank Annabelle Creation, here's how I'm going to rank this movie. So overall, if you want a way better attempt at adopting that doll for its one origin to the big screen, well, don't worry. This is the version to watch, so I would totally watch it by Annabelle Creation for your collection for sure, no doubt. If you want to rank Annabelle Creation, I'm going to give Annabelle Creation an 8 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. That officially wraps up Annabelle Creation. That wraps up the Conjuring reviews for this season. I think the rest of them are going to have to wait till next year, because we got other stuff to review. So what's going to be our next episode? Well, we are going back to Dark Castle Entertainment, and they're doing one of the final remakes they did. And for this one, we're doing one from 2005. And guess what? The setting is a wax museum. And it was marketing the death of an actress, of a character being played by a hated actress. House of Wax is our next episode. Now tell me down in the comments down below what you guys think about this movie, Annabelle Creation. Whether you love this film, whether you still didn't like this one. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this episode. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.